My parents always pressured me to surrender everything to my golden sister, but my quiet power move forced them to confront a brutal reality they never saw coming. I'm Laura, a 32-year-old woman from Oregon, and I've spent most of my life in the shadow of my older sister, Emily, who's 3 years older than me. Emily's always been the star, smart, charming, and able to sweet-talk her way out of anything. Meanwhile, I've been labeled the responsible one, which apparently just means the one who does all the heavy lifting and gets none of the applause. Growing up, Emily got the best of everything. Her birthdays were extravagant backyard blowouts with bounce houses and pony rides. Mine were modest pizza parties in the dining room with a grocery store cake. For Christmas, Emily got the deluxe Barbie dream house. I got a second-hand knockoff with a missing elevator. My parents would say, "You don't need fancy stuff, Laura. Be grateful for what you have." And I was. I just couldn't help noticing that Emily's gratitude was never demanded in the same way. The real divide hit when I reached college. I'd worked my tail off in high school, juggling AP classes and extracurriculars to keep my GPA sky high. I got accepted to a local university and planned to commute from home to save on dorm costs. Emily had gone to her dream school, with my parents covering every penny, tuition, dorms, even spending money. So I figured they'd help me out too. Wrong. When I mentioned living at home, Mom looked at me like I'd suggested moving to another planet. "If you're staying here, you'll need to contribute," she said matter-of-factly. "Emily got a full ride from us because she deserved it. You need to learn responsibility." I was 18, about to start college, and they were demanding rent, $400 a month for rent and utilities, plus I had to buy my own groceries. That's a fortune when you're a broke freshman working part-time at a bookstore for $9 an hour. I tried arguing, reminding them how they'd bankrolled Emily's entire college experience, how she never worried about money. Mom just shrugged. "We gave Emily what she needed. You're different. You're independent. You'll figure it out." So I did. I picked up every shift I could at the bookstore, sometimes skipping meals to make ends meet. I'd walk past the campus coffee shop every morning, envying students sipping lattes and munching pastries, while I survived on peanut butter sandwiches and free break room coffee. I never bought a single textbook at full price, always second-hand or borrowed from the library. Every month I handed over $400 to my parents while Emily was off at her out-of-state school, living in a shiny new dorm they paid for. She called me once to complain about her dorm's air conditioning not being cold enough, and I nearly lost it. My car didn't even have AC because I couldn't afford to fix it. My parents sent Emily spending money every month. I overheard Mom on the phone saying, "We don't want her to struggle. College is hard enough." I stood in the kitchen, clutching my $1 ramen noodles, wondering why that compassion never extended to me. To make matters worse, my parents constantly praised Emily's achievements. She earned a 3.2 GPA in her communications program, and they threw her a massive graduation party with a catered buffet and a DJ. When I graduated with a 3.9 GPA in computer science, we had a quiet dinner at home. Mom made lasagna and said, "Well, we don't want to make a fuss." Looking back, it wasn't just the lack of financial help that hurt. It was the clear message that I didn't matter as much. Emily was always framed as the star with potential, while I was just there. Even when I succeeded, it was brushed off. "Laura's smart, she doesn't need help," they'd say, as if being capable was a curse. After college, I moved out as soon as I could, renting a tiny apartment near my first job. I started building my life on my terms. It wasn't easy, but it felt liberating to escape their expectations. I worked hard, lived frugally, and began saving. Meanwhile, Emily married Ryan, who my parents adore despite his chronic unemployment. They have 3 kids now: Chloe, 5 years old, Ethan, 4 years old, and baby Lucas, 2 years old. My parents are constantly bailing them out. When their car broke down last year, my parents gave them money for a new one. When Emily complained about the stress of raising 3 kids, Mom and Dad offered to babysit every weekend. I wish I could say it doesn't bother me anymore, but it does. No matter how much I achieve, it feels like I'll always be second to Emily. That's why I keep my life private from my family. I know they wouldn't care, not really. So, I decided it was time to buy a house. I'd been renting a cramped apartment for years, paying way too much for what was basically a shoebox, and I'd saved diligently for ages. I finally hit a point where I thought, I deserve this. I didn't tell my family, not because it was some big secret, but because they can't just be happy for me. Everything turns into a group project with them, and I knew they'd make my house hunt about Emily and her kids, expecting whatever I bought to benefit them. So, I figured it was easier to keep my mouth shut until the deal was done. That was too optimistic. Somehow, a coworker, Megan, who's always in everyone's business, let slip that I was house hunting. She mentioned it to someone who happened to be Emily's neighbor, and the news spread like wildfire in our small Oregon town. A few days later, Mom called, all overly cheerful. "Laura, why didn't you tell us you're looking for a house?" I played dumb. "Oh, I'm just browsing, nothing serious." She barreled on. "Emily and I have some great ideas for you. You'll need something big enough for everyone, at least 4 bedrooms for the kids, of course." What kids? I don't have kids. She kept going like it was the most normal thing. "You'll need space for Emily's family when they visit, and for us too. Oh, and it'd be great if it was close to Emily's place." I was stunned. Somehow, my house hunt had already become their solution to Emily's problems. I mumbled something non-committal and got off the phone fast, hoping it was a one-time thing. It wasn't. From that day on, Mom and Emily flooded me with house listings. I'm not exaggerating. It was like a part-time job for them. Every day, I'd get a dozen links to ridiculous houses, huge places with 4 or 5 bedrooms, pools, 3-car garages, the works. It was like they thought I was shopping for a reality show mansion. Mom texted, "Did you see that one on Cedar Street? It's huge, just perfect." Emily sent a link to a 6-bedroom house. This would be so suitable for us. We could finally have space to spread out. Us. I stared at the message, wondering how my buying a house had become a group effort. The worst part, they weren't even pretending it was about me. Every house was geared toward Emily's family. This one has a finished basement Ryan could turn into his man cave. The kids would love the pool in this one. Look, Laura, there's even a guest room for Mom and Dad when they visit. It was exhausting. At first, I tried gently steering them away, reminding them I was looking for something small for myself, but that only made things worse. That's when I decided to stop replying. I muted the group chat and ignored their texts, figuring they'd eventually get the hint and move on. Meanwhile, I kept looking for houses on my own. I'd spend evenings scrolling through Zillow and weekends checking out open houses. I didn't tell anyone where I was going and made sure to avoid anything near Emily's neighborhood. The last thing I wanted was to run into someone who'd blab to Mom. After weeks of searching, I found the one. A small 2-bedroom cottage just outside the city. It had everything I wanted. A cozy porch, a sunny kitchen, and a backyard big enough for a garden. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like home the second I walked through the door. I knew it was mine. I put in an offer, and after a few nerve-wracking days, it was accepted. I can't describe how good it felt. For once, I was doing something entirely for myself, without anyone else's input. Of course, I didn't tell my family. I figured I'd let them keep sending their helpful suggestions, while I quietly moved forward. But then Mom called out of nowhere, "We're having dinner next weekend. You're coming, right?" I almost said no, but I thought, let's just get this over with. So I went, planning to drop the bomb that I'd bought a house, no sugarcoating. The dinner was pure chaos. Emily's kids were running around screaming, Ryan was parked on the couch watching TV, and Mom was bustling in the kitchen. She glanced over. "Oh, good. You're on time for once." We sat down, and at first it was the usual small talk. Dad complained about gas prices, Ryan ranted about work, and Emily whined about how hard it was to manage 3 kids. "Lucas keeps waking up in the middle of the night," she said, piling mashed potatoes on her plate. "We're so cramped. I feel like I'm losing my mind." I knew where this was going, but I played along, nodding while focusing on my lasagna. Then Mom cleared her throat in that way she does when she's about to make a big announcement. "Laura," she said with an over-the-top smile, "we've been talking, and we think we found the perfect house for you." I nearly choked on my water. Of course, they'd come armed with a plan. "Oh?" I said, keeping my voice neutral. Emily chimed in. "It's a beautiful place, only a few blocks from us. It has 5 bedrooms, a huge yard for the kids, and even a guest suite." Mom jumped in. "It's perfect for everyone. Enough space for the kids to have their own rooms, and Ryan could set up an office. Plus, it's in a great neighborhood, close to good schools." I stared, completely dumbfounded. They weren't even trying to pretend this was about me anymore. Emily smiled like it was a done deal. "We can go see it tomorrow if you want." That's when I'd had enough. "Actually," I said, putting down my fork, "I already bought a house." The room went dead silent. Even the kids stopped making noise. "What?" Mom said, her voice sharp. "I bought a house," I repeated. "It's a small 2-bedroom cottage just outside the city. It's perfect for me." For a second, I thought they might be happy for me. Then Mom's face turned red, and Emily's jaw practically hit the floor. "A cottage," Emily said, her tone dripping with disbelief. "How are we supposed to fit in a cottage?" "You're not," I said firmly. "I bought it for me." Mom jumped in before Emily could respond. "Laura, how could you make such a big decision without consulting us? We've been working so hard to find the perfect place for you." "No," I said, trying to keep my cool. "You've been working hard to find the perfect place for Emily and her family. I didn't need your help. I knew what I wanted, and I bought it." Emily's voice got high-pitched, like she was about to cry. "But we need this, Laura. Do you know how hard it is for us in that tiny apartment? Chloe and Ethan have to share a room, and Lucas's crib is in our bedroom. It's not fair to the kids." I took a deep breath, trying not to snap. "That's not my problem, Emily. I've worked hard to get to this point, and I'm not giving up my dream house to fix your situation." Dad slammed his hand on the table. "You're being selfish, Laura. Family is supposed to help each other. What's wrong with you?" I stood up, my heart pounding. "I'm not selfish. I'm finally standing up for myself. If that makes me the bad guy in your eyes, so be it." The room exploded into chaos. Emily was crying, Mom was yelling about how she raised me better, and Dad was ranting about how disappointed he was. Ryan just sat there, shoving food in his mouth like nothing was happening. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door. Mom followed, shouting, "You can't just walk away from your family like this." I turned back and said, "Watch me." I got in my car and drove home, shaking with a mix of anger and relief. I felt like I'd finally taken a stand, but I was bracing for whatever came next. The fallout hit hard and fast. That night, Emily sent me a photo of her kids sitting on their couch, surrounded by toys, with the caption, "Look how cramped we are. Do you think this is fair to Chloe and Ethan?" I didn't reply. What was I supposed to say? That buying a house for myself had somehow caused her kids to share a room? The next day, I woke up to 5 missed calls from Mom and a string of texts from Emily. One said, "You always think about yourself. I thought family mattered to you." Another, "Mom is so upset she couldn't even sleep last night." And then the kicker, "You've changed, Laura. This isn't the sister I grew up with." Right, because the sister she grew up with was too busy being ignored to develop a backbone. I decided to ignore it all and focus on work, but the texts didn't stop. Every few hours, Mom chimed in with her own gems. "You're being so selfish, Laura. We're all disappointed in you. I hope you realize what you're doing to Emily's kids. You need to reconsider. It's not too late to sell the house and buy something better suited for the family." I muted both of them, but then they started leaving voicemails. It was the same guilt-ridden nonsense, but hearing their voices made it hit harder. Mom sounded genuinely angry. Emily sounded like she was on the verge of tears, and at one point, Dad called and yelled for 5 straight minutes about how I was tearing the family apart. It didn't stop there. A few days later, my aunt, who I hadn't spoken to in years, called me. She said, "I heard about what's going on with Emily. Can't you find it in your heart to help? Family comes first, Laura." I had to laugh. This was the same aunt who barely acknowledged me growing up, and now she wanted to lecture me about family. I told her I wasn't discussing it and hung up. Next came the social media posts. Emily posted a photo of her kids squeezed together on their bunk bed with the caption, "All they want is a little space to grow." But I guess some people think family isn't worth helping anymore. The comments were full of sympathy from her friends who had no idea what was going on. "You're such a great mom. Whoever's letting you down doesn't deserve you. How could anyone leave you guys in that situation?" I wanted to scream. She was making me out to be the villain, and I couldn't defend myself without looking petty. So I stayed quiet and kept scrolling. But then Mom posted something on her own page. She shared a picture of my house. How she got it, I have no idea. With the caption, "It's so sad when someone forgets where they came from. Family sacrifices so much for you, and this is how they repay you." I blocked both of them immediately, but not before a coworker messaged me to ask what was going on. Apparently, Megan had seen the post and was gossiping about it at work. Now, half the office thought I'd abandoned my family to live in a mansion by myself. For the record, my house is just a cottage, not exactly lifestyles of the rich and famous. The stress was starting to get to me. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt a wave of anxiety. I stopped checking social media and avoided my inbox. Even when I was working, I couldn't focus because I was bracing for the next call or message. Things hit a new low when Emily showed up at my apartment one evening, unannounced. I opened the door to find her standing there with Lucas on her hip and the other 2 kids in tow, all crying or whining about something. "Laura," she said, her voice cracking, "we need to talk." I crossed my arms and stood in the doorway, blocking them from coming inside. "What do you want, Emily?" "Please," she said, tears in her eyes. "We don't have anywhere else to go. The landlord's raising our rent again, and we can't afford it. Just let us stay with you for a little while. The kids need stability." I felt my heart sink, but I stood firm. "Emily, I'm sorry you're struggling, but my house isn't an option. It's not big enough, and honestly, this isn't my responsibility." She stared at me like I'd just kicked her puppy. "So that's it? You're just going to let us suffer?" "I'm not letting you suffer," I said. "I've worked hard to get where I am, and I'm not going to let you guilt me into giving it all up." She muttered something under her breath, then turned and stormed off, her kids trailing behind her. I shut the door and leaned against it, feeling a mix of guilt and relief. The next morning, Mom called to tell me I was heartless for turning Emily away. She accused me of being cold and ungrateful and said I'd regret it someday. I hung up without saying a word. Even as I was dealing with this, their texts kept popping up. Mom sending walls of guilt-ridden paragraphs, Emily firing off photos of the kids. I even got a voicemail from Dad that started with, "I hope you're happy," and I didn't bother listening to the rest. I couldn't take it anymore. The first thing I did was change my number, giving it only to trusted friends and work. I tightened my social media privacy settings and blocked anyone who might stir the pot. After changing my number, I blocked them on everything: Facebook, Instagram, even random relatives who might try to mediate. It felt so good to cut them off, but of course, the peace didn't last. It all started last weekend when Mom showed up at my house, unannounced. I was in the backyard, trying to figure out how to plant lavender. Google makes it look so easy, but I'd already killed 3 plants when I heard knocking on my front door. At first, I thought it was a neighbor or a delivery, but when I got to the door, there she was. Mom, standing on my porch with a pie in her hands and the fakest smile I'd ever seen. "Hi, Laura," she said, like she'd just stopped by for a casual visit and not after weeks of me ghosting her. Hi," I said, caught totally off guard. I stood there, debating whether to let her in, but she shoved the pie toward me. "I thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing. I brought your favorite, apple." "My favorite is cherry, but okay, Mom." Against my better judgment, I let her in. I didn't want to make a scene. She set the pie on the counter and looked around the house like she was taking inventory. "This is lovely, Laura," she said, running her hand along a chair. "You've done a great job." I didn't know what to say, so I mumbled a quick thanks and waited for her to get to the point. She sat at my kitchen table and sighed dramatically. "I wanted to apologize," she started. "Things got a little heated, and I realize now that we were wrong to push you like that. You've worked hard for this house, and I should have respected your decisions." I stared at her, trying to gauge if she was serious. It sounded nice, but something about her tone didn't sit right. Then she launched into a speech about how proud she was of me, how the stress of Emily's situation had made everyone act out. "But that's no excuse," she said, giving me a sad, almost pleading look. For a second, I felt myself softening. Maybe she was trying to make things right. But then she hit me with, "I was thinking, maybe we could have a fresh start. I'd love to come over again sometime. Maybe bring Emily and the kids. It'd be nice for everyone to see your new place." And there it was. I tried to keep my cool. "I don't think that's a good idea right now," I said carefully. "Things are still tense, and I'm not ready for that yet." She nodded, but her smile was a little too tight, and her eyes kept darting around the room, like she was sizing up the place. After a few more minutes of small talk, she stood up. "Well, I should get going. Thanks for letting me stop by." I walked her to the door, and as she was leaving, she turned back. "I really mean it, Laura. I just want us to be a family again." I nodded, but didn't say anything. After she left, I locked the door and stood there, staring at the pie on the counter. Something about the visit felt off. For days, I couldn't stop replaying the conversation. Was she genuine, or was this another manipulation tactic? The timing seemed too convenient. She'd spent weeks harassing me, and the second I cut them off, she showed up with an apology and a pie. She didn't mention the texts, voicemails, or my blocking her, like she was pretending none of it happened. And the bit about bringing Emily and the kids? That didn't feel casual. It felt calculated, like she was testing the waters. My gut was screaming, and I was right. A few days after her visit, I went about my week as usual. Work was busy, so I was holed up in my home office, focused on deadlines. I wasn't thinking much about my family. Things had been quiet since Mom's visit, and I hoped they were backing off. Then came Saturday. I'd gone out for errands in the morning, grocery shopping, a stop at Target, picking up a package at the post office. I got home around noon, bags in hand, ready for a quiet weekend. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something odd. Emily's SUV was parked right in front of my house. My heart sank. I walked to the door, fumbling with my keys, and heard voices inside. At first, I thought maybe I'd left a window open or the TV on, but as I stepped into the entryway, the truth hit like a brick. Emily, Ryan, and their kids were in my house. The scene was pure chaos. Chloe and Ethan were sprawled on my couch, surrounded by snacks and toys that weren't mine. Lucas was toddling around the living room, chewing on one of my throw pillows like a teething ring. Ryan was in the kitchen, raiding my fridge, and Emily was in the sunroom, rearranging my furniture like she was on a home makeover show. "What the hell is going on?" I blurted, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. Emily looked up, completely unfazed. "Oh, hey, Laura. We figured it'd be easier to just move in while you were out." I stared, trying to process what she'd said. "Move in? Are you serious?" She rolled her eyes, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Mom gave us the key. She said it'd be fine." I felt like I was going to explode. "Mom gave you what key?" "The spare key," she said, gesturing toward the kitchen counter where I'd left it during Mom's visit. "We really needed the space, and your house is perfect for us. It could have been bigger if you'd listened to us, but it'll do. Ryan can finally have an office." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Get out," I said, my voice dangerously calm. Emily scoffed. "Laura, don't be like that." Ryan chimed in, leaning against my fridge with a sandwich. "You're single. You don't need all this space. This house makes way more sense for us." I was done. I pulled out my phone and started dialing 911. "Seriously?" Emily said, her voice dripping with disbelief. "You're calling the cops on your own family?" "Watch me," I said, holding the phone up so she could see. When the dispatcher answered, I calmly explained that my sister and her family had broken into my home and were refusing to leave. Emily and Ryan tried to argue with me while I was on the phone, but I ignored them. By the time the cops arrived, I was shaking with adrenaline, but I was determined not to let them get away with this. The officers were professional but firm. They asked Emily and Ryan to explain why they were in the house, and their story was as ridiculous as you'd expect. "We're family," Emily said, as if that was a valid legal defense. Ryan kept going on about how I had plenty of space and how it was the right thing to do. The officers weren't having it. They told Emily and Ryan they were trespassing and needed to leave immediately. Emily started crying, saying she didn't know it was a big deal, and Ryan muttered something about how I was being selfish. I stayed silent through the whole thing, letting the cops handle it. It was honestly satisfying to watch Emily and Ryan pack up their stuff, including the snacks they'd raided from my pantry, and shuffle out the door. After they left, one of the officers pulled me aside and asked if I wanted to press charges. I thought about it for a moment, but honestly, I just wanted them gone. I told the officer I didn't want to press charges as long as they stayed away from my property. He nodded and said they'd file a report in case anything else happened. Once they were gone, I locked the door and just stood there for a while, taking it all in. My house felt different now. Violated, almost. The idea that they had just let themselves in, without asking, without even caring how I'd feel, made my skin crawl. I've already called a locksmith to get all the locks changed, and I'm thinking about installing a security system too. I'm done giving them the benefit of the doubt. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a moment of desperation. This was entitlement, plain and simple. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact that my own sister thought this was okay and that my mom gave them the key. I don't even have words for that yet. I called my lawyer, explained the whole situation, and had a formal cease and desist letter drafted and sent to Mom, Emily, and Ryan. The letter outlined everything they'd done and made it clear that if they continued to harass me, I wouldn't hesitate to take legal action. Anyway, that's where things stand for now. I'm still furious, but I'm also kind of numb. Part of me is wondering if this is really over or if they're going to try something else. I could use some outside perspective. Do you think Mom was being sincere with her apology? Or was this all part of a bigger plan? Part of me wants to believe she was trying to fix things, but the other part feels like I'd be naive to trust her. Let me know your thoughts. Your support has been a lifeline through this mess.
Thank you for listening. Please share your thoughts, like this video if you found it helpful, and subscribe for more.